Welcome to the PRmoment Podcast. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Lorraine Emmett, the founder and managing director of the award-winning B2B tech PR agency EC-PR, which specialises in B2B public relations for engineering, science and technology scale-ups. And today, we're going to dive into Lorraine's insights onto how B2B companies can gain a trust advantage. Before we start, our PR Masterclass, the Agency Growth Forum, is live. Virtual and face-to-face tickets are available. The event always sells out in the room, so if you could get a wriggle on it, if you want to get a face-to-face ticket, do check out prmasterclasses.com or the homepage of PRmoment for the full speaker lineup. Also, check out PRmoment's TikTok content. It'll keep you up to date with the best creative campaigns in public relations. We've got interviews with interesting PR folks, and there's our weekly good and bad content with the good fellow that is Andy Barr. Also, I should say thank you so much to our PRmoment podcast sponsors, the PRCA. Lorraine, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you on. Trust is such a complicated but interesting emotion, isn't it? Just talk to me. What do you say trust? What do you think, I should say, trust means in a B2B environment?
We talk about trust meaning that an organization will act in the best interests of its customer with integrity and consistency. That's how I think of trust. There are lots of definitions of it, and there are lots of ways of measuring it or scaling it. My favorite being that on a scale of extremes, you start with paranoia and you end up with unwarranted belief. And what you really want is somewhere slightly more in the center.
Okay. And I'm just trying to think of it in reality. Just say that bit again at the start. You said, how do you define trust in a B2B environment? I just want to explore that a little bit more.
So I think of trust in a B2B environment is where a company will consistently deliver on its promises.
Yeah.
It will act with integrity.
Yeah.
And it will always put the interest of the customer first.
Okay, I'll go with that. And how much is that related to product and how much is that related to brand?
Trust is related to product and brand, of course it is, but also to the advocates and those who've got direct experience of it.
Okay.
So I might have a need for something, and I ask someone for a recommendation, and because I trust them, I will trust that the person they're recommending or the thing they're recommending will have the same values that they have. So
Right.
there is inferred trust there.
Right.
And then
Go on. No, you go.
So it's up to the individual, it's up to the brand, then to live up to the expectation.
Yeah. I get that, but it's such trust has been. We'll talk about it in a moment. But Edelman's Trust Barometer brought trust to the fore within public relations, didn't it? And quite rightly so. But it's such a complicated emotion, and I've yarned it through with various people over the years. And someone, I thought, what summed it up well to me earlier, that how complicated trust is as an emotion, because. No, if you ask anyone whether they trust banks, everyone says, no, I don't trust the bank. But we give them all our money every day, if you see what I mean. So it's a multi-layered, complicated thing, trust, isn't it? With a B2B setting, what does that mean for communicators then?
In the context of banks, we trust them because they live up to the cognitive trust element. So we talk about there being cognitive trust and effective trust. Cognitive trust is the ability to do a thing technically correctly, which
Right.
the banks can do. They can process our money, but we do not believe they have our best interests at heart. And the effective trust is our belief that they have our best interests at heart. So there are two elements to it. And in the perfect world, we should be striving to have the two together. Because we don't have an alternative other than putting our money under our beds, and maybe that's the why alternative Bitcoin and what have you do so well for a time, was because we wanted to try something that wasn't the banks, because a lot of us don't like them. They don't serve our interests. I think within B2B, the same elements hold true. It's the cognitive ability, the ability to do something. It's the integrity to do something well, and it's the benevolence. It's the values that the organization and the individuals within the organization demonstrate that lead to trust.
Okay. So as communicators, what's our role in that then? Can we create trust? We can help it. We can help move it along a bit, can't we? Can we create it?
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. So we can move it along. We can't turn a fundamentally distrustful or dishonest organization. We cannot make those organizations trusted, but we can guide in terms of ensuring that the promises are consistent and advise that they should be consistently lived up to. The comms need to be consistent across all the departments. It's not okay to be saying one thing in our public facing business, but actually our governance is all up the creek. Or because when procurement finds out in the buying process, you will lose trust. So we have to guide and say, that the whole thing about honesty being a critical element of securing trust. And that's where I think the consistency and demonstrating track record. Yeah, we go around these are these golden oldies. It's a track record. It's proof that you can do it. It's case studies. It's referral. It's testimonial. It's other people saying that we live up to the values that we talk about. That's what ensures that we are trustable.
Right. I talked about it a little bit in my intro there, about some research you've done around why thought leadership is such an important tool for creating trust. But just give us a little insight into that.
So thought leadership done well or done properly can be a really powerful tool. And there are a lot of people putting out material that isn't thought leadership, is not the grade A thought leadership, because we've had this conversation before. So the best thought leadership, and this was identified through the work that Common Parks recently demonstrated, the most powerful thought leadership is there are 7 pillars, and I'll just briefly talk through these. We've got action oriented. The people, senior executives, want their thought leadership to enable them to make good decisions for their business. They want to read material that gives them very clear direction about what good looks like. It needs to be original. And what's really interesting about here is 60% of thought leadership that organizers on the receiving end are getting, they've seen before from other suppliers, other vendors.
Okay.
60%. So that's basically saying that what we're putting out isn't original, it's vanilla. And if it's vanilla, it's not differentiating ourselves. We're not differentiating the business. So how is that helping? So action-oriented, original, targeted. It needs to speak to specific roles, specific pain points, specific issues. Authentic. We do not want to see replicated AI content. Evidence-led was very important because that provides a unique window on the world. And it might be evidence-led that you might be reanalyzing data and coming up with a different answer or a different direction based on your own business experience, but it needs to be evidence-led. Okay. Forward thinking. So executives need to be demonstrating their view of the world. And that was very important to the Institute of Business Value, IBM's thought leadership arm. They identified that as well as being very important. And commercially focused. So actually understanding the business impact of whatever it is that's being explored in the thought leadership. Okay. Not all organizations do original research. Not all organizations can afford to do or choose not to prioritize doing original research. So they don't always have that originality in the data. So you have to find a way of creating that original perspective.
And so just for example, when you're putting together a campaign around thought leadership, I know Coleman Parks' research isn't the only research that you've looked at and you use, but what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get something to tick every single one of those pillars off? Are you saying that some pillars are priorities more some of the time and others less so? What does it look like in reality?
Gold standard is they tick all the boxes,
right?
And that's what the research they did amongst 600 executives worldwide. The IBM research was 4,000 senior executives. So they're saying they need, I would say, 5 of the 7. And I think that starting with 1 or 2 is just not good enough. It's just not good enough. Because when you start to, I love this expression, Nick Peck talked about this, when you start atomizing your thought leadership, you start getting it out there, of course you focus on different elements, different bits of the pillar. Right. But yeah, I think it's really important to have to start with something substantial that you've got something to atomize. Otherwise, all you're talking about is one stat or one particular point of view, which isn't thought leadership. Thought leadership should be provoking you to think, do, or say something different.
Right. What does good thought leadership look like in public relations these days? Because when we chat about this in the pre-show chat, I had this slightly confused hypothesis, which I'm not sure is right, but isn't pretty much all of a PR comms team's output just now thought leadership in one form or another? And I suppose the converse view of that is that, in some markets, some verticals, white papers are thought leadership. White papers are kind of the go-to, aren't they? So on that spectrum, what does the normality look like?
Well, all material that PR, probably per se, consumer and B2B, is designed to educate, inform, and persuade. Yes, it's all designed to educate, inform, and persuade. The challenge is that because we're using some very similar tools and we're not differentiating properly, the recipients of our thought leadership are seeing the same thing from multiple brands. Yep. So they might say, well, they're all saying go faster, so we should go faster. Doesn't mean they know who to go with to go faster with. So the thought leader is going to be the one that says, in order for this industry to go faster, it needs to do X, Y, and Z, or whatever it is. And the research, for example, the research we have says that these are going to be the challenges you're going to have to overcome. You have to bring more to the party than exactly the same as every other brand in your category.
Yeah, and I kind of get that. But if you're thinking about, I don't know, commentary opportunities in a trade mag, if you're thinking about CEO communications on LinkedIn, your white paper, sales material at a conference, a speaker slot, that's all thought leadership, isn't it? So it's a technical, possibly too academic point, but it just occurred to me that thought leadership and PR are basically the same thing.
It's the opportunity. It's the opportunity for thought leadership. Okay. It doesn't make it thought leadership. So in the essence, the way I would see it is, if you have your whatever the source for your white paper is, you create your white paper. That would be the essence of your thought leadership, and then you take it out to the conference, to the editorial teams, to the blogs, to the social, to the webinar, whatever, round table. You have to amplify it and get that comms out, and that should last you. It could last you 3 months, 6 months, a year, depending on the depth of the research that you've done.
Right. Okay. Another interesting piece of research we chatted about when we were talking before was the Element LinkedIn B2B Thought Leadership Impact Report, which seems to highlight the importance of thought leadership in building trust and directly influencing B2B purchasing, amongst other things, to be fair. But just give us a bit of an executive summary of that, because it's one of those, I don't know how long they've been doing it. They've been doing it a few years now, haven't they? Yeah. It's quite an interesting one.
They have, and they do talk to a much larger type of organisation, certainly that we deal with. But there are some really juicy bits of detail in there. That they said the headline for me was that 40% of deals stalled due to the misalignment between the buying panel. So while you have the lead, the key person who is doing the buying, call it your CTO, half of the buying panel are going to be hidden buyers, for want of better a description. They're hidden buyers, but have equal influence over the buying decision. So if one person's saying yes, but 5 people are saying no, that's when the deal stalls.
Totally. Okay? I mean, I would suggest that's forever been the case, but it's definitely an interesting insight. Yeah.
But more interesting is that the consumption of thought leadership amongst the buying panel, the hidden buyers, is as high, by a percentage point, as the key buyer.
Okay.
And when they don't take sales meetings, but when they absorb, they become like this Trojan. The thought leadership becomes a Trojan horse. If they engage and they are convinced by the thought leadership, they then come into play on behalf of the vendor.
Right.
Because
so they're not going to take your call, but you've got to work out in your thought leadership campaign a way to influence them.
Yes, which is why it's so important to make sure that when you put out your communications, it's written in English, not jargon. And it seems like it's a really moot point, but if you get rid of all the jargon and focus on creating the business case, nodding to the technology, the more detailed information, then actually you're going to get a better result than if you simply focus on just convincing the CTO or whoever your buyer is of the appropriateness and best choice being your product. Right. That was my main takeout from the Edelman report. In fact, I'm just glancing down here at this. I think I've covered all the points. Really, that was my main outtake of it.
Fine. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there are lots of influences on decisions, aren't there? And it's something all of us have to think about in our when we're trying to get deals over the line, I guess. Just bring it, I guess, home a bit. EC-PR recently, you're about to launch your Trust Advantage report, and it's quite a nice angle you've got here. Why trust is so important for SMEs. Because a lot of this stuff can focus on big businesses, and of course there are learnings from big businesses to smaller businesses, but you've actually done a piece of research that's purely focused on the trust advantage for SMEs, which is quite a really interesting piece of work actually. And one of the things that resonated for me from that study was again the idea of having multiple decision makers and multiple stakeholders, but which I guess aligned to one of your outtakes from the Edelman LinkedIn piece. But just give us a bit more of a rounded executive summary of what that report's findings are.
The first thing was that 7 out of 10 CTOs, because that was who we spoke to, had passed over a vendor that they didn't trust, even though the tech was a great fit.
Do you say 7 out of 10? 7
out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
So this and some of the data responses are really quite funny. You know, it's the gut instinct, or going straight into Google and finding out where the inconsistencies are, and going no, what I'm being told and what I can see, read about are two very different things. Half the buyers that we spoke to said that trust was more important than speed of delivery, innovation, and price. So I thought that was really quite powerful. Spoke to me. 40%.
So trust is more important than what you say, innovation and price.
Speed of delivery and price.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they will pay a premium if they trust the supplier, and 38% would actually take on board a challenger brand if they trusted them.
Right. And then, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because if you don't actually believe that something's going to work, you don't want to buy it, do you? So,
you don't believe the people. You don't trust the people. They're overclaiming, or yes, that tends to be the key ones. They're overclaiming their ability to deliver a particular solution.
Right.
Or they demonstrate that they don't have the best interest of the customer. Right. It's all about the contract. It's all about the money.
Right. And I mean, are those outcomes of that thought leadership and trust in B2B markets? We talked a bit about them there. We were trying to. They're defensive and offensive, aren't they? We've talked a bit about them in terms of sales pipeline, which I guess would be your offensive examples, but there are some defensive implications as well, right?
I think yes, but it comes back to if you create your moat well, okay, you are protecting yourself. You're protecting your brand when there's a challenging economy. Again, we talked about 40% of the respondents said that trust became more important in times of economic uncertainty. So, defense is always the best. Sorry, attack is always the best form of defense.
Right. No, your moat analogy is a good one there, isn't it? Yeah. It's you can protect yourself. Yeah. If you got a good product in times of trouble, people still need the product, don't they?
Yeah.
So what is that? I'm just thinking within that B2B public relation example, bring it all down to the practical. What do you find good good thought leadership looks like to build that trust, which you found is so important. Where are we at the moment in terms of the public relations market, in terms of the most effective ways of using thought leadership content to build trust?
I'm going to go back to, I think that the need is for some really important for it to be original.
Okay.
And it needs to be campaigned properly, not created and forgotten. I think a lot of organizations, they'll do their piece of research and they go, yay, yeah. And then they file it away. Yeah. And the fact no one's actually had an opportunity to see it yet. I said earlier on a webinar that repetition is the god of marketing. We need to keep saying these things interestingly in a variety of ways. But thought leadership, it's not necessarily different every time. If it's a truism, it's a truism, then keep saying it. But just find interesting ways of communicating, which is why PR exists. To find a different way of expressing it.
And I guess it's another element that's important is the measurement of it. I mean, clearly, ultimately, increase of sales, revenue, etc., is the most beautiful way of measuring these things. But presumably, there is a suite of thought leadership measurement KPIs that you might use.
They are not that different to the way you would measure any campaign, other than the fact that it's not possible to do it quarter to quarter. You simply can't. Trust is built over the long term. It is experiential. It is, we were talking earlier about it is how the customer experiences their engagement with you before they buy. It's their experience of you after they buy. And if their experience is a poor one of the people or the promise, that might not be the fault of the thought leader. So the thought leadership. It might simply be that it's found that it's not authentic, it's not reliable, and the organisation isn't as transparent as they were making out.
Exactly.
But conventionally, it's awareness. Do they have they heard of the concepts and the arguments that we've been presenting? And you can measure that very clearly, and that comes out the atomization of the thought leadership. Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, trust scores are also related to your competitor set, aren't they? I mean, different sectors can have can be more or less trustworthy, and if you're part of that competitor set, you're likely to be in that. You might argue that if you're a good trust score in one sector is a bad trust score in another, but that's all you're going to get. I don't want to highlight any particular sectors, but you know what I mean. You can, banks is an interesting one. We all have a go at them, but if you're the top trusted bank, that's pretty good. But compare that to a sustainability brand, then it's comparatively, presumably, a fairly poor trust score.
Yes, that's what I would expect to see. You have to take it in the context that they're operating at. Very much
but I guess that, and I was gonna, it's the other thing with that. I mean, I do an annual podcast about the Element Trust Barometer, and I'm trying to sort of take myself back there. But those trust scores do go up and down quite a bit, don't they? They're more. I think they're probably more fluid than they used to be. Probably reflective of the times we're living in. But that sort of single-digit growth from one year to the next, it seems to go up a bit more than that. But maybe for brands, it's a bit different. I don't know.
I think as we're seeing the confluence of business and politics and our social leaders, and not our social leaders, our political leaders, the trust is directly. We've never trusted our politicians, and that's got worse. Unfortunately, we're seeing the confluence of business leaders and politics being one and the same, and we're in such a period of uncertainty that I would not expect to see trust on business per se increasing. I would be very surprised if we did, but that doesn't mean that individual brands within individual sectors might not experience shifts.
Right, which I guess is why all this stuff is so important and so interesting right now. Lorraine Emmett from EC-PR, thanks so much for coming up on the show.
Thank you, Ben.